At her husband's company party in Chicago, he grabbed the microphone, mocked Florence's law degree as a joke, and introduced his young assistant as my replacement. By sunrise, Florence's phone was gone, their accounts were locked, and he promised his lawyer would crush her. If you've lived anything like this, share your story in the comments. Florence stood by the drink table and straightened the plastic name badge that kept tilting toward her collarbone. The ballroom was full of people who knew her husband's job title better than they knew her. Behind the stage backdrop, the company logo sat over the slogan, Compliance Week, Chicago. Grant Holloway threaded through the crowd with a champagne flute and the wireless mic, smiling like he'd been handed a promotion. He tapped the mic once, then again, and waited for the room to turn toward him. Florence watched his eyes scan faces, pausing where the laughing would be safest.
All right. Before we get too serious about compliance, I've got a little announcement. A few people clapped on reflex. You all know my wife, Florence. He pointed at her as if she were a slide on a deck. She's got a law degree. He let that hang, then smiled wider. And I'm telling you, it's basically a party trick. Laughter rippled, not because it was funny, but because Grant had decided it should be. Florence adjusted the badge again, slow enough that no one could call it a reaction. Next week's audit is going to be brutal, a colleague murmured near the ice bucket. Just don't put anything dumb on the company card. Grant raised his glass toward the stage lights. Speaking of replacements, his assistant stepped up in a fitted blazer, hair perfect, smile practiced. So nice to meet you, Flora. Her hand was cool and steady. Her eyes stayed on Grant, not Florence. Florence said, holding the handshake a beat longer than necessary.
But yes, think of me as the sign that points people to the restrooms. A couple of laughs landed late, confused about whether they were allowed. At the far corner of the room, a security camera blinked red while its lens stared at a blank wall. It does that, the AV guy whispered when Florence looked up. Always chooses the best moments to act up. Dessert came out on silver trays, and Florence set her phone beside her plate to answer a work text. Grant's hand covered it like a napkin. I'll hold that for you, he said, already sliding it toward his jacket pocket. Florence didn't reach across the table. She reached for her water instead. I've got an early meeting tomorrow, Grant added, lifting his glass again. You can grab your own ride. He walked off with his assistant, leaving Florence with half a cake fork and a missing rectangle of glass and metal. She stood, smoothed her dress, and headed for the hallway without waiting for anyone to notice.
Ma'am, VIP guests can't use this exit, a guard said, stepping into her path.
Florence nodded once, changed direction, and kept walking. In the garage, she raised her wrist and opened the rideshare app on her smartwatch. A valet cart rattled past and she stepped aside, thumb poised over the fare estimate. She tapped confirm and the screen flashed. Joint account card declined. Florence rode the elevator up from the garage with her wrist still showing the red decline message. At the front desk, she asked to use the courtesy phone, gave her name, and requested a cab. The clerk didn't ask why a woman in a cocktail dress was calling at midnight. He just slid a pen across the counter for a signature. Florence wrote her name in block letters like she was logging evidence, then rode home with the city sliding past the windows. By 8:30 the next morning, she was at her own desk downtown, hair pinned back, badge clipped straight.
She typed her password, waited for the dashboards to load, and watched 3 tiles turn gray. A small banner appeared. Access removed. She tried again, slower, as if the system might respect manners. She walked to IT with her laptop open. The technician, a young guy named Ben, didn't take the seat he usually offered. He stayed standing, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the corner of her screen. Is this a glitch? It's not a glitch. Then what is it? Temporary restriction, Ben said. Order from management. Which manager? Ben swallowed. I can't see that. He tapped twice, printed a ticket, and angled the paper so she could read it without him looking at her. Back in her aisle, conversation stalled the moment she approached. 2 analysts who normally debated lunch plans stared at their monitors like they'd been assigned a surprise exam. Her team chat showed new messages.
then deleted them, then fell silent.
One coworker, Diane, hovered near the copier and finally blurted it out without meeting Florence's eyes.
Last night, it has to be a misunderstanding. Florence nodded once, the way she did when vendors apologized and still wanted the contract. At 10:15, an email popped up from Grant's assistant, sent to a distribution list that included Florence because her address had always been paired with his. Subject line: Couples Gala RSVP. The body was formatted like a checklist, his name pre-filled, her name beside a blank box, like she could be unselected with a click. Florence forwarded it to her personal account, flagged it, and closed the window. She didn't reply. She printed it, folded it into her planner, and returned to her tasks as a timer started. She left work early and went to the condo building with a tote bag and her spare key. The key didn't turn. The lock cylinder looked new, clean metal against a scuffed door.
The doorman stepped out of his booth with a manila envelope. Mrs. Holloway, I signed for this. Procedure. Who brought it? Courier service, he said. No return address. The envelope was thick, heavy with paper. Florence weighed it in her hand. At least he's willing to invest in paper. The doorman blinked, then pretended he hadn't heard. With no way back in, she took the Red Line south and checked into a narrow motel near the tracks, paying with the one card that still worked. She bought a prepaid SIM at a corner shop, activated it, and wrote the new number on the back of a receipt. On the small desk, she started a running list. Times, calls, who said what. The notebook looked like it belonged to someone preparing for an audit, not someone who had been married 8 years. Her phone rang on the new number before she'd even put the pen down. Marisol Vega's face filled the screen in a FaceTime request. Sharp lipstick, hair pulled up, the background of a law office she never bothered to decorate.
Where are you?
Near Roosevelt, Florence said. A motel.
What paperwork do you have in your hand right now?
A thick envelope. No return address.
Did he cut you off financially?
Florence glanced at her wallet.
Something's locked.
Good, Marisol said, like she'd heard the weather report.
Take photos of the envelope before you open it. Keep every receipt. Don't sign anything today. If you message him, keep it short. If you want to say something long, save it instead. Florence flipped the envelope over and photographed both sides. Texts arrived from people who had never texted Florence first. Her mother-in-law wrote, "Don't embarrass the family." A friend from Grant's department sent one message. Wow. Then nothing. No follow-up, no question. The digital version of stepping back from a spill.
Florence walked to an ATM near the station and fed in her backup card. The machine whirred, paused, and displayed, "Account restricted." She stood there for 5 seconds, staring at the screen the way she stared at frozen software, waiting for it to correct itself. She pulled the card out, turned away, opened the Notes app, and typed, "I'm in a weak position," as the bank doors unlocked and she stepped through. Florence stepped to the counter before the line thickened. The backup card sat between her fingers. The unopened envelope weighed her tote down. The teller's badge read Kim, and Kim looked at Florence like she'd already decided to stay professional. "I need printed statements for our joint checking and the credit card tied to it." Kim's hands paused. "Does your husband know you're requesting those?" "He knows more than I do." Kim asked for ID, typed, and went to the printer. Florence waited at the side table where brochures promised financial wellness in 3 easy steps. The packets came out warm and stapled. Florence flipped past balances and focused on rhythm. Every other Friday, a deposit hit labeled reimbursement from Grant's company. 2 days later, the same amount bled out through hotel charges, a steakhouse, and rideshare trips that started after midnight and ended at a downtown address she'd never visited with him. The merchant notes called it business travel, like a label could turn a pattern into a reason. On the credit card pages, the same hotel name appeared with different room rates, as if someone kept upgrading. A charge from a florist sat between 2 rideshares, and a jewelry store showed up once, then again exactly 14 days later. The reimbursements that fed the account carried tidy memos: client dinner, travel meal, parking, and each memo matched a spending burst that didn't include a single parking garage in Chicago. Florence walked back to the counter and pointed at the restriction notice printed at the bottom of the page. Why does it say restricted if the account is still open? Kim leaned closer, lowering her voice without making it a secret. It usually means an owner asked for additional verification. Sometimes they remove an authorized user. I'm an owner. Kim gave a small shrug that meant policy outranked marriage. I can print the last 90 days of itemized card transactions. Anything older needs a formal request. Print it. Kim fed the printer again, then handed Florence a slip. This is the dispute hotline if you need it. Florence took the slip and tucked it behind the stapled statements. She carried the stack back to Kim. Can I get 6 months before this? There's a restriction on the account, Kim said, voice careful. I can print what's already generated. Older pulls might require the primary holder. That's Grant.
If there's a legal dispute, subpoenas work better than counter requests.
Florence kept her tone level. Print what you can, stamp it if you're allowed. Kim printed 3 more sets and stamped each page as certified. Florence took them as if they were grocery receipts, not the start of a fight. She walked to the law library near the courthouse and signed in with the same handwriting she used at work. She didn't linger. She opened the state form site and pulled up divorce petitions, financial disclosures, and instructions that read like they were written by someone who hated adverbs. She printed the packet, found the sections on marital assets and dissipation of assets, and marked them with the highlighter colors she kept in her purse. One hotel line caught her. The date matched a Thursday Grant had called the team off-site. He'd told her not to swing by, said spouses made people awkward, said he'd be back late.
Florence wrote off-site beside the charge and drew a line to the reimbursement that funded it. She dialed the hotel number from the statement. Thank you for calling the Lakeshore Grand. How may I help you? I'm confirming a charge from May 20th. Reservation under Grant Holloway? Keyboard clicks. That booking was under a corporate account. What was the event code? The receptionist didn't answer right away. I'm not able to provide that information. Single room or 2? I'm sorry. I can't discuss guest details. Florence thanked her and ended the call. She opened her notebook and wrote, business trip equals a 2-person vacation with a buffet. It read like a work note, which made it easier to keep going. She kept sorting until her table looked like a timeline. The farther back she went, the smoother it got. Reimbursements timed to payroll, spending timed to weekends, everything sized to disappear among normal bills. The party hadn't been a spontaneous slip. It had been the moment he decided he could say the quiet part out loud. Back at the motel, Florence logged into her personal email on an old tablet she didn't trust with much besides Wi-Fi. She searched Grant's name and filtered for attachments. A months-old thread surfaced with a PDF. Expense policy _update.pdf. The subject line was his. Read it so you know. She tapped the file. A banner warned, file access expires soon. Florence pressed download anyway, watching the bar begin to move. The download finished before Florence's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text from a friend or a bank alert. The motel front desk called her room. Miss Pugh? Yes? There's a courier envelope for you. Do you want it brought up? Leave it at the desk. I'll come down. She found a thick white packet waiting under the counter, her name typed neatly, return address from a downtown law firm she recognized from billboards. The clerk asked for a signature. Florence wrote it the way she signed compliance logs at work. Clear, no loops. Then carried the packet back to her room and opened it over the desk like it might stain the furniture. The letter started polite and stayed sharp. It informed her that Grant Holloway had retained counsel. It requested she vacate the marital residence immediately. It warned her not to interfere with Grant's employment, his accounts, or any corporate records. It included a date for a temporary hearing and a list of temporary demands. Exclusive use of the home for Grant, limits on contact, and communication routed through attorneys.
The last page was a checklist of what she should return: keys, garage fob, any company property, as if marriage had been a badge she forgot to turn in. Her new phone vibrated before she finished the second page. Grant's name popped up like nothing had happened. "My lawyer is going to crush you in court." Florence read it once, then set the phone down beside the letter. She didn't type back. She flipped to the hearing date and copied it into her notebook, then turned the page and wrote the law firm's number, the way she wrote vendors who tried to bully the company into rushing approvals. On the third page, the letter mentioned potential misuse of company funds. It didn't accuse, it hinted. Florence stared at the phrase for a moment, then opened the PDF Grant had sent months ago. The policy wasn't written to help her, but it did explain what his company claimed to care about: reimbursements, audits, reporting channels, documentation. Florence dialed the corporate compliance hotline listed on the policy. A recorded voice asked her to choose a language, then asked her to leave a message or speak to an intake specialist. She selected the specialist and waited through 2 rings. "This is corporate compliance. How can I help you?" Florence kept her voice even. "I'm reporting suspected misuse of company funds by an employee. I can provide dates, merchant names, and transaction amounts." "Do you have an employee ID?" "I don't." "Are you a current employee of the company?" "No." "How do you have access to this information?" "I have bank statements that show reimbursements going into a joint account and charges that match the timing and amounts. The charges are labeled as business travel." There was a pause while the specialist typed. "Can you provide the employee's name?" "Grant Holloway." "Relationship to you?" "I'm his spouse." Another pause, longer this time. "Thank you. We will document your report. If there is a need for follow-up, someone may contact you." "Will he be notified?" "I can't discuss internal process." Florence heard her own breathing for a second and realized what she'd just done. Not wrong, not illegal, but loud. She had raised her hand in a room where Grant controlled the mic. After the call, she tried logging into the family phone plan portal to transfer her number. The screen rejected her password, then offered a recovery link that went to an email she couldn't access. She tried the health insurance app next. A banner appeared before the login page finished loading. Policyholder changed. Her calendar chimed with a medical appointment reminder, then a cancellation email arrived a minute later. "Your appointment has been canceled at the request of the policyholder." Florence forwarded the email to herself, printed it at the motel business station, and stapled it behind the lawyer letter. She didn't call the clinic to argue. She opened the bank app instead and watched the same restriction warning hover over every account, like a close sign no one bothered to flip back. She took the train to the hotel where the company party had been held. The lobby staff recognized her face, but not her name. Florence asked for the manager and waited by a brochure rack until a man in a suit jacket approached. "How can I help you?" "I need the garage security footage from Friday night. The window is about 15 minutes. I left around midnight." The manager didn't look surprised. He looked prepared. "Our garage cameras are under maintenance." Florence blinked once. Of course they are. Everybody needs a break right when it matters. "I'm sorry," he said, and his tone suggested he was sorry for the conversation, not the situation. "Is there an incident report?" "Not that I can access without a police request." Florence thanked him, asked for the maintenance ticket number, and watched him offer a business card instead. She took it, wrote the date and garage maintenance on the back, and walked out without raising her voice. Back at the motel, a cardboard box from the condo sat outside her door, her name written in Grant's handwriting. Florence dragged it in, cut the tape, and pulled out her old laptop, the one she used for personal files, resumes, and anything she didn't want on a work machine. She opened it and waited for the familiar login screen. It booted to a bright setup page. "Welcome!" Florence clicked past the prompts, watched the empty desktop appear, and opened the File Explorer anyway. The folders were gone. the scanned statements she'd saved, the screenshots, the timeline she'd been building, wiped clean like someone had tidied up after her. She set the laptop down, picked up the lawyer packet, and stared at the temporary hearing date again. Then she unlocked her new phone and tapped Marisol's name. When Marisol answered, Florence didn't add context. "I need to learn how to cross-examine," she said, as her thumb hovered over the speaker button. Marisol picked the booth by the courthouse windows, the kind that let you see who was walking in without craning your neck. 2 coffees were already there, both black, both untouched. Between them sat a pad of clean printer paper and a cheap pen that looked stolen from a bank chain. Florence slid in across from her, set the lawyer's packet on the table, and lined up her stapled statements. Marisol didn't ask how Florence slept. She glanced at the hearing date, then at Florence's new phone. She tapped the paper once, like a metronome starting a lesson. Today. Where are you staying? A motel by the Red Line. What paperwork do you actually have? Bank statements, the letter, and a downloaded policy file. And he cut you off? Florence tipped her wallet onto the seat and showed 2 cards and a few bills. Mostly. Marisol opened the statements and didn't flip randomly. She went straight to the repeating Fridays, circled the reimbursements, then drew arrows to the matching weekends. Her nails were short, practical. "This isn't just an affair," she said, and turned one page so Florence could read the merchant line. "Client dinner," it claimed. Under it, the receipt note read, "Anniversary set menu." Florence stared at the words until they stopped looking like words and started looking like a code someone forgot to erase. The restaurant was the kind with handwritten chalk specials and a line out the door, not the kind that hosted corporate clients on expense accounts. Grant had told her he hated anniversary dinners, called them performative, yet the charges landed every 2 weeks like a paycheck. Florence heard Marisol's pen tap again and understood, without saying it, that the party speech had been the finale, not the beginning. Marisol slid the paper pad toward her. "You can do this the safe way," she said. "Meaning?" "You file, you negotiate, you take whatever split his attorney offers, and you pretend the company piece doesn't exist." Florence lifted her eyes. "And the other way?" Marisol didn't raise her voice. "You document everything the right way. You get third-party records. You prepare for him to paint you as unstable, vindictive, or both." She paused, then added, "If you don't own the numbers, you'll be led. Whoever holds the microphone gets to tell the story for you." Florence took the pen. Her hand wanted to write a paragraph, to explain, to justify. Marisol flipped the pad to a blank sheet and drew 2 columns, question and answer. "No speeches," she said. "So I'm not allowed to be reasonable?" "You're allowed," Marisol replied. "It just won't help." They practiced with neutral facts first, addresses, dates, account names, until Florence learned to stop the moment an answer arrived. Marisol corrected her tone when it drifted toward debate. Florence turned each correction into a checkbox, the way she'd learned to survive meetings with executives. Marisol slid the stapled statements back across the table. "Now do it with money." Florence drew a line under the hotel charge and wrote, "Did you authorize this?" Then, "Was it for business?" Then, "Who was present?" The questions looked blunt on paper, almost rude. Florence glanced at her growing checklist and let out a breath that wasn't a laugh. "I thought I got the law degree to argue," she said. "I guess I'm using it to remind a grown man to answer the question." Marisol took a sip of coffee. "Welcome to family court." After an hour, Marisol folded the paper pad and tucked it into Florence's tote. "Make copies of everything," she said. "I tried." "Try again, but assume someone is deleting what you touch." They walked 2 blocks to a small storefront that rented lockers by the month. The clerk slid a contract through the slot, asked for an ID, and pointed to the signature line. Florence signed, paid cash, and was handed a key on a frayed plastic tag. She tested the locker twice, then set a folder of stamped statements and the attorney letter behind the metal door. Back at the diner, Florence paid the check before Marisol could reach for it, then pushed the receipt into her notebook. Outside, the sidewalk traffic had thinned, and the courthouse steps were empty except for people smoking and checking phones. Florence opened her shopping app and searched for a portable scanner, the kind that fed paper through rollers and saved a PDF without needing a laptop. She chose one with overnight delivery and hovered over the button that said, Confirm. A message from Grant arrived first, short and clean, like a calendar invite. Don't make me look bad. Florence left her thumb hovering for another second, then tapped Confirm. The scanner order went through, and the app sent a bland email receipt that felt almost comforting. Shipping address, tax, expected delivery.
She forwarded it to herself, screenshot it, and filed it with the other records. Back at the motel, she logged into the oldest cloud account she still remembered, the one she'd used before Grant insisted they streamline everything. The password reset took 3 tries and a call to a helpline that treated her like a forgetful aunt. When the account finally opened, she found scraps, photos, a few PDFs, a spreadsheet she'd made for household bills. The timeline was broken, but it existed. She downloaded every fragment and saved copies to a thumb drive Marisol had handed her like it was a spare key. The next morning, Florence returned to the bank branch and asked Kim for another certified printout, this time including the stamp on every page. Kim didn't ask the question about Grant again. She just stamped, stacked, and slid the packet across the counter.
Florence rented a desk at a co-working space off Clark Street, the kind with day passes and a receptionist who didn't care why you needed a quiet place to work. She set up like it was a normal compliance day. Laptop, binder, notebook, 3 pens in a row. The only difference was that every document had her marriage on it. The portable scanner arrived in a plain box at the co-working front desk. Florence signed for it, plugged it into an outlet, and tested it on a blank page. It chirped, saved a file, and asked for a name. She labeled it by date, not by emotion. Next, she built a simple spreadsheet from the bank stamps, deposit, merchant, amount, note, and pinned it to the top of her binder with a paperclip. When the cloud backup didn't match, she noted the gaps and circled them for subpoenas later. She photographed every tab and uploaded the images to 2 separate drives. Marisol met her at lunch with a paper folder and a timer app already open. "We're doing reps," Marisol said.
Like the gym. More like physical therapy. Marisol played Grant the way opposing counsel would. Charming, vague, certain he could talk around any question. Florence read from her list. "Did you pay for the Lakeshore Grand on May 20th? "It was a work trip." "Yes or no? Did you pay for it?" "I already answered." "Yes or no?" Marisol leaned back, pleased in a way she didn't show on her face. "Again," she said. Florence repeated the question until Marisol finally gave a clean answer. They ran the sequence over and over, changing dates, merchants, amounts, until Florence could keep her voice flat no matter how Marisol tried to drag her into an argument. A notification arrived while Florence was labeling tabs. Court scheduling update. The temporary hearing had moved up. The disclosure deadline had moved with it, now measured in days instead of weeks. Florence printed the notice and slid it under her binder clip. Marisol's phone buzzed. She glanced once and stood. "I have to get back," she said. "Text me if anything shifts." Florence walked Marisol out, then crossed the parking lot toward her own car. A dark sedan sat in a corner space with no visible placard, engine off. Florence didn't slow down. She changed direction, headed toward the rear entrance, and watched the sedan roll forward at the same time, tires turning without hurry. She didn't look straight at it. She swiped her keycard, slipped through the rear door, and waited for it to latch before moving. Once upstairs, she took out her phone and sent Marisol a 5-word text. "Someone really likes to tag along." The reply came fast. "Don't confront. Log it." Florence wrote the car description in her notebook and went back to work. An hour later, an email from Grant's attorney hit her inbox with the crisp subject line, "Preservation and Production." The body was polite the way a knife is polished. It demanded she surrender any and all materials related to the company.
warned against misappropriation of proprietary information, and suggested her recent conduct could be referred to appropriate authorities. Florence held the last bank statement halfway out of the scanner when the stranger shut the door. Windbreaker, flat envelope, no small talk. Florence Pugh? Yes? I'm a process server. Documents for you. He offered the envelope. Florence took it, set the statement down, and let the scanner idle. Confirm your date of birth. She did. He slid a page forward. Sign to acknowledge receipt. Florence signed. He tore off the copy. Supplemental subpoena and a request for production related to marital finances. You've been served. Thanks, Florence said, the way she thanked people at work when they added a problem to her queue. He left. Florence squared the scanned pages, clipped them, and labeled the stack. She opened the envelope and saw more than one heading. A subpoena for additional statements. A production request for tax returns, retirement accounts, and any records reflecting dissipation. Each page had a barcode and a return date that was sooner than the hearing date she'd been living by. Florence ran a pen down the list, circled the deadlines, and slipped the packet behind the bank stamps. At the front desk, the receptionist glanced at the papers. Everything okay? Just paperwork, Florence said. Let us know if you need copies. Florence nodded, because she did, and walked out before her voice could change. Her phone vibrated. Grant. Where are you? He asked, cheerful like he was checking dinner plans. Florence ignored the question. Did you take my phone at the party? What? You said you'd hold it, then you walked out with it. I didn't take your phone, Grant said. You're spiraling. Florence glanced at the court caption on the served papers. Is that what you told your lawyer? I told him the truth, and if you keep poking around my company, he'll file for a protective order. You won't be allowed anywhere near me. You mean you'll ask a judge to enforce your personal space? Florence said. Stop making this messy, Grant replied and hung up. Florence saved the scans to the thumb drive, signed out of co-working, and headed straight to the courthouse with the subpoena folded in her tote. At the courthouse entrance, Florence emptied her tote into a gray bin. Stapler, highlighter, the thumb drive on its lanyard. The security officer pointed at the envelope. Legal papers? Yes. He waved her through after the scanner beeped at her keyring. She reassembled her things at a bench, then stopped at the self-help desk. A volunteer slid a pamphlet toward her. If you're filing without an attorney, keep copies of everything you hand over, the volunteer said. I'm trying, Florence replied. Then don't bring corporate documents unless they came from a third party, the volunteer added, eyes flicking to the bank stamp. Florence asked for the case number. The volunteer wrote it down. At the clerk's window, she laid out the papers and asked what she was supposed to do next. The clerk skimmed the top page. Temporary hearing's been moved up. Your earlier notice is outdated. Florence slid her printed schedule update under the glass. This is what I have. The clerk pushed a fresh notice back. This is the current date. Financial disclosure is due before then. Miss it, and the judge won't be sympathetic. Florence asked for a stamp. The clerk stamped it, and Florence stepped aside to call Marisol. Marisol arrived fast, hair pulled back, a thin folder tucked under her arm. They served you at the co-working place? Marisol asked. Print room. Marisol opened the folder and laid a one-page checklist on the bench, 2 columns labeled Allowed and Don't Touch. Bank stamps, your own account records, and anything you get through proper subpoenas, Marisol said. No screenshots from his systems, no internal emails, nothing with a confidentiality footer. They want to bait you into looking like you stole something. Florence scanned the list. I don't remember getting married with this form. Marisol's mouth twitched. Neither do I. They sorted Florence's stack against the checklist. Marisol didn't take over. She tapped what needed copies, circled the disclosure deadline, and wrote the self-help desk number in the margin. Keep your questions yes or no, Marisol said. If they start telling a story, bring them back to the question. Florence folded the checklist and slid it into the front pocket of her tote. Outside the courtroom, people waited with folders, receipts, and tired faces.
Grant walked past with his attorney and stared forward, as if eye contact might count as a concession.
Marisol sat a chair away, close enough to be there, far enough to make Florence do her own standing. Florence checked the clip on her papers and rose when the bailiff called out. "Florence Pugh, appearing pro se?" Marisol gave a single nod as Florence stepped toward the doorway. The bailiff's voice faded behind her, replaced by the scrape of chairs and the low murmur of other cases being called. Grant didn't look back. His attorney steered him toward the elevators, hand on his elbow like he was fragile. Marisol kept pace beside Florence until they reached the hall bench. "You did fine," Marisol said. "Fine is not the same as safe," Florence replied. She didn't stop to argue that point. She headed to the clerk's window to confirm the updated schedule, then to the copy station to stamp her own notes with the courthouse date. By the time she got back outside, her phone had 2 new emails and a missed call from an unknown number.
One email was from the HR address at Grant's company. "We need to speak with you regarding an allegation involving data access and travel expenses." Florence read it twice, then forwarded it to Marisol. She saved screenshots of the lines, then wrote the senders and times into her notebook. Her thumb hovered over reply, but she locked the screen instead and walked to the train, keeping her tote zipped. At the motel, she set the new bank stamps next to the subpoena and opened the downloaded expense policy. She searched for Report and found a section labeled Reporting Misuse. Under it, another heading, Audit Trail. The language was dry, but the message was clear. Someone could make a timeline out of logins the same way Florence made one out of charges. Her phone rang again. Marisol answered first on speaker. "Tell me you didn't call their HR again today," Marisol said. "They emailed me," Florence replied. "It says allegation." "Read it to me." Florence read the line.
Marisol went silent for a beat, then spoke slower. "That's not about your marriage. That's a preemptive strike." Florence opened a second attachment that had arrived a minute earlier, this one from Grant's attorney. It was a letter addressed to her by full name, accusing her of unauthorized access to proprietary systems and warning that evidence had been preserved. The letter listed timestamps. They weren't random. One cluster landed during the company party. Within the hour, Florence's phone disappeared. Another set landed the next afternoon, during the window when her old laptop arrived in the box and booted like it had never met her. Florence stared at the times until they formed a shape. "He filed a complaint," she said. Marisol exhaled. "Of course he did. If you look like you stole, your proof looks like revenge." Florence pulled up her own work email on the tablet and tried the dashboard again. The same 3 tiles stayed gray. The restriction was still active, still unexplained. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt like somebody had been building a file about her reliability while Grant built one about her motives. She thought of the hotel manager's practiced apology, the garage camera maintenance, the way Grant had slid her phone away with a smile. None of it proved anything by itself. Together, it explained why the story was already written. Marisol cut through her silence. "Listen," she said. "If you panic and hand over devices, they'll comb for anything to label as theft. If you rush to submit screenshots, they'll argue chain of custody. You stay clean. Third-party records only." Florence looked at the pile of paper on the desk and nodded once. "I'm trying to stay clean," she said. "He wants me to be a criminal. I don't even have time to be a criminal." Marisol made a small sound that might have been a laugh if the situation allowed it. "Good. Now think. What do you have that doesn't touch his systems?" Florence opened the motel closet and pulled out a gym bag she'd been carrying since the condo door stopped opening. At the bottom was an old prepaid phone from years ago, the kind she'd kept as a backup during travel. It wasn't synced to the family plan. She charged it, powered it on, and watched old notification previews slide across the screen. Bank deposits, ride receipts, a hotel confirmation that never fully loaded but showed a date and a dollar amount. "Preview notifications," Florence said. "They're cached. I can photograph them with the new phone. It's not his company. It's not a login." "That's promising," Marisol replied. Document it like you're reporting a defect. Date, time, source. No editing. Another email arrived before Florence could answer. This one was from Grant's company HR again. Calendar invite attached. Mandatory meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please bring any devices relevant to the allegation.
Florence left the calendar invite open and slid the phone away from the edge of the desk. She wrote 3 dates on the motel notepad. HR at 9 tomorrow, financial disclosure due Friday at noon, and the next hearing Monday morning. The spacing on the page looked like a trap with labeled jaws. She spread her receipts beside the lawyer letters. Train fare, a week of motel charges, the prepaid SIM, the co-working pass. Her paycheck still hit her personal account, but the balance was thinner every time she refreshed it. Grant could afford to be generous later. She had to be solvent now. For a moment, she considered the quiet option. Sign whatever temporary agreement his attorney shoved across the table, keep her head down at work, let the company handle its own mess, and walk away with less because less meant faster. Then she looked at the HR invite again and realized the company was already in her marriage. The safe path was gone. It had just been renamed. She called Marisol and put the phone on speaker so her hands could keep sorting. Marisol answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're not going to that HR meeting alone." "I don't have a choice." "You do. You can reschedule. You can ask for written questions. You can bring counsel." "I can't afford counsel." "Then you bring structure," Marisol said. "Same rule as court. Short answers, no volunteering." Florence read the timestamps from the attorney letter. Marisol didn't interrupt, but her breathing changed when Florence hit the ones that matched the party and the laptop reset. "He wants it to look like I hacked him." "He wants you to react," Marisol said. "Don't make your case by breaking rules. Make him explain his own." Florence turned the lawyer letter over and used the blank back to list what would hit her account in the next week: the motel bill, the train fare to court, and the prepaid phone plan. The numbers were small compared to Grant's salary, but they were hers, and they were real. She pictured HR at a table asking for devices, passwords, proof she wasn't the problem. She called Marisol back. "I can lose my job," Florence said. "I can't lose the right to tell the truth in a room where he's talking." Marisol didn't soften her voice. "Then you file clean and you answer HR like you answer court. Facts only. Dates. Sources." "And if they push?" "You repeat the question they're asking, then answer only that." Marisol sent the yes or no framework a second later, and Florence watched the attachment arrive like a rope dropped from above. Marisol emailed her a one-page framework of yes or no questions and a checklist of filings. Florence printed both at the motel lobby, then walked 2 blocks to a copy shop to buy a ream of paper and a folder with a hard spine. She labeled the tab in black marker, Romance, Corporate. It wasn't a joke. It was a category. At the Public Law Library, she pulled up the Illinois Financial Disclosure Forms and the subpoena and motion to compel templates the clerk had pointed her toward. She filled in names, addresses, and case numbers, then left blanks where she couldn't swear to details yet. For every blank, she added a note: subpoena. She rebuilt the spending timeline from the stamped statements, cross-checking it with the preview notifications on her old phone. Each entry got a source tag: bank stamp, cached preview, receipt. So nothing depended on a login Grant could claim was stolen. She highlighted the restaurant line that said Anniversary Set Menu and wrote beside it, in all caps, "Not a client." By late afternoon, she had a stack thick enough to feel real. She walked to the courthouse again, passed through security, and found the family division clerk's window. The clerk looked over her motion and raised an eyebrow. "You're filing pro se?" "Yes."
You understand you're held to the same rules as an attorney?
"Yes." "This motion asks to conduct cross-examination yourself."
That's what it says.
"Do you have legal training?" "I have a law degree." The clerk stamped her appearance form first, then stamped the motion, then stamped the receipt for the filing fee waiver request she'd included. Each stamp landed with a dull thud that made the paperwork heavier in her hands.
Florence slid the stamped copies into the hard-spine folder and clipped the rest for her locker. Florence let the unknown numbers ring until they gave up, then walked to the train with her folder hugged against her side. By Monday morning, she was back at the courthouse, passing through security with the same practiced routine. Keys in the bin, papers stacked, pen clipped to the spine like she was heading to a meeting instead of a temporary orders hearing. The mediation hallway was already full. People held grocery store envelopes, manila folders, crumpled printouts from bank websites. Florence checked in at a small window, got told to wait, and took a seat with her hard-spine binder balanced on her knees. Grant arrived 10 minutes later with his attorney. He didn't scan the room the way most people did. He walked straight toward the check-in window as if the building belonged to him, then turned and looked at Florence like she was a delayed invoice. His attorney smiled first, all teeth and calm. "Miss Pugh?" Florence nodded. "Counsel," she said, using the word the way you say "sir" to a parking attendant who's holding your keys. Grant didn't sit. He stood near the wall, phone in hand, thumb moving like he had emails to clear before lunch. When the mediator stepped out and called their case number, Grant moved before Florence did, as if he'd been cued. They sat at a small table. The mediator, a middle-aged man with reading glasses hanging from his neck, opened a file and spoke in a steady voice about temporary arrangements, cooperation, and keeping things civil. Grant's attorney nodded along like she'd written the script. Grant finally looked at Florence. "Can we not do this like a spreadsheet?" he said. Florence didn't answer that. She set her stamped statements on the table, lined up, tabbed, dated. Grant's mouth tightened. "See?" he said, turning to the mediator. "This is what I mean. She's always cold. She doesn't know how to be a wife. Now she's turning a divorce into some kind of test." His attorney added a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Grant has been under tremendous stress," she said. "He's just asking for a reasonable transition." Florence kept her hands still. "I'm asking for access to my property and accurate disclosures," she said. Grant leaned back. "Listen to her," he said. "Access, disclosures, like I'm a case file." The mediator lifted a palm. "Let's focus on temporary issues," he said. "Housing, finances, communication." Florence slid a page forward, ready to show the pattern of reimbursements and spending. Grant's attorney didn't wait for her to finish. "Objection," she said, despite it not being a courtroom. "These documents are not authenticated. We don't know the source. We don't know if they've been altered." Florence looked at the stamp from the bank branch. "They're certified statements," she said. Grant's attorney shook her head like Florence had misunderstood something basic. "A stamp doesn't establish relevance," she replied. "And my client's employer has raised concerns about her access to proprietary information. We're not going to litigate corporate travel in a family matter." Grant watched Florence the way you watch someone struggle with a jammed printer. "She's been snooping," he said. "It's embarrassing." Florence reached for the mediator's attention, but the mediator's gaze drifted to the attorney, the person with credentials and a bar number. "Temporary orders are limited," the mediator said. "If the court wants more, the court will ask." They didn't settle in mediation. They walked to a courtroom instead, where a judge sat above them and moved through the calendar like it was a grocery list. Florence stood when told, spoke when asked, and held her binder like it could keep her upright. Grant's attorney repeated the same points: unauthenticated, unclear sources, potential misconduct. She asked for exclusive use of the marital residence, requested that Florence retrieve personal items only by appointment, and pushed for limits on contact. Florence tried to hand up the stamped pages. The judge glanced, then looked past them. "Ms. Pugh," the judge said, "you understand temporary orders are not final." "Yes," Florence said. "Do you have counsel?" "No, Your Honor." Grant's attorney spoke again. "Given the allegations involving company data, we request an order that she not contact my client's employer or interfere with his work in any way." Florence opened her mouth to respond, then closed it when the judge lifted a hand. "I'm not interested in collateral disputes today," the judge said. "I'm issuing temporary orders for stability." The judge's words landed as clean sentences with sharp edges. Grant would retain exclusive use of the marital residence for now. Grant would keep possession of most household property pending further proceedings. Florence would receive minimal temporary support, calculated by a formula the judge recited without looking at her face. Communication would go through counsel when possible. Florence would not contact Grant's employer. Effective immediately, the judge said, and moved on to the next case. In the hall, Grant's attorney gathered papers and walked away first. Grant lingered long enough to pass Florence at close range. His voice dropped, warm and mean. "See," he said, "your law degree really is a joke." Florence didn't look at him. "Yeah," she said, barely louder than breath. "Every joke has an ending." A clerk handed Florence a sealed envelope of orders. She stepped toward the elevator, thumb sliding under the flap, and read the first line as the doors started to close. Effective immediately. The elevator doors met and cut off the hallway noise. Florence stood with the sealed envelope open in her hands, reading the first page while the car dropped. Effective immediately sat near the top, printed like a label, not a decision. When the doors opened at street level, she stepped out, folded the orders, and walked past the security desk without looking back at the courtroom schedule board. Her phone vibrated again as she reached the sidewalk. Not with another unknown call, but a calendar notice from her own company. Subject: administrative leave. She stopped and opened it. The message said HR had received an anonymous complaint alleging she had misused financial data and that she was placed on leave pending a cross-investigation. It instructed her to surrender her badge and laptop access by end of day and to attend a meeting tomorrow. Florence rode the train to her office because she needed to see what still worked. At the lobby turnstile, her badge beeped red. A security guard glanced at the screen and asked for her name. He made a call, listened, then handed the badge back like it was already expired. "HR asked that you wait upstairs," he said. In the elevator, she opened her email and watched the login spin, then fail. Access denied. In a small conference room, 2 HR reps sat with printed papers, notepads, and a box for electronics. One of them, a woman Florence had met once at a holiday party, kept her smile tight. "We're placing you on administrative leave," the woman said. "Is this connected to my divorce?" Florence asked. "We can't discuss personal matters," the other rep said. "We received a report that you accessed or shared sensitive financial information without authorization." Florence slid her hands flat on the table. What system? They wouldn't name the source. They wouldn't show the complaint. They asked for her work laptop, her badge, and a written list of any personal devices that had ever accessed company email. Florence handed over the badge and signed a receipt. "You'll still be paid?" she asked. "Leave is unpaid until the review is complete," the woman said. Florence nodded once, like it was policy. When she stood, the rep added, "Do not delete anything." Outside, Florence called Marisol from the sidewalk and spoke before the call fully connected. "My company put me on leave," she said. "Unpaid?" Marisol asked. "Yes." Marisol exhaled through her nose. "That's Grant's smokescreen. Do not file anything new unless we can prove chain of custody. If you submit something the judge thinks violates the order, he'll use it. If you submit nothing, he'll talk for you. So we move carefully." Florence headed to the locker storefront near the courthouse because the stamped copies she'd filed away were worth more than clothes. The clerk behind the counter recognized her and looked down at the register. "You can't access that unit right now," he said. "Why not?" "We got a preservation request. We had to change the lock." He pointed to a small sticker on the back wall. Evidence hold. Florence walked to the row, saw the new padlock, and felt the key in her pocket become decorative. Florence bent toward the lock and read the date handwritten on the sticker. She spoke the way she would during a site inspection. "He's really committed to the theme. Replacement," she said. The clerk shifted his weight. "Ma'am, I'm just following instructions." "Who gave them?" "I can't say. It came with a case number." Florence asked him to print the request. He refused, but he wrote the case number on a receipt and slid it over.
Florence walked back toward the courthouse entrance, receipt in one hand, folder in the other. The lobby was crowded with people waiting for elevators and metal detectors. She stopped near the information desk to call Marisol with the case number. Before she could dial, a familiar windbreaker moved through the crowd. The same process server from the co-working space held out another envelope. "Florence Pugh?" he asked. Florence lifted her eyes. "You've been served again," he said. Florence took the envelope and signed. He didn't linger. She opened it at the edge of the lobby, careful not to block foot traffic. The caption read, "Motion for Protective Order."
The allegations were neat bullet points: harassment, stalking, repeated contact at his workplace, interference with his employment, threats through third parties. Florence read her own name beside those words and watched two strangers step around her like she was a trash can left in the aisle. A couple argued about child support behind her. Someone laughed at a phone video. Florence folded the protective order motion back into its envelope and walked out of the courthouse without looking for Grant. Marisol met her at the public tables near the vending machines, already holding a legal pad and a pen. "You cannot answer this with a story," Marisol said. "You answer it with paper." Florence slid the motion across. Marisol read the bullet points, then circled the phrases harassment and stalking. "He's trying to get you gagged," Marisol said, "so he can keep talking."
Florence opened her notebook and wrote the next hearing date at the top of a page. Then the word boundaries underneath it. "We do everything the clean way," she said. Marisol's eyes lifted. "Good," she said. "No screenshots from his company. No surprise emails. No friends doing favors." Florence nodded and stood. She rode the train north to the condo building, not to go upstairs, but to speak to the doorman. The man recognized her and glanced toward the elevator bank like he expected trouble to step out. "Mrs. Holloway," he said. "I'm sorry about the lock." "I need a statement," Florence said. "Just what happened?" The doorman hesitated. Florence pulled a blank affidavit form from her folder and set it on the counter with a pen. "You told me once your niece was trying to break a lease," Florence said. "I sent you that tenant hotline. This is the same kind of thing." He stared at the form, then took the pen. "I can write what I saw," he said. "Lock changed, key didn't work, envelope delivered." Florence watched him write in slow, careful print, then sign and date it. She asked him to add that he handed her the packet because he had signed for it per procedure. After that, Florence went back to her office building, even though her badge no longer opened the gate. Diane from her team met her in the lobby with a brown envelope. "I heard," Diane said. "This is ridiculous." Florence held out another affidavit form. "I need you to write what you saw," Florence said. "Then my access got pulled, and IT said it was management." Diane looked around, then wrote it anyway, including Ben's name and the words, "temporary restriction." She signed with a shaky hand and slid the paper back like it was hot. "You didn't deserve this," Diane said. Florence didn't answer with comfort. She tucked the affidavit into her folder and texted Marisol a photo of both signatures. Marisol met her that evening at the law library with a stack of forms. She didn't take Florence's binder. She set her own papers beside it and pointed. "Motion to limit the protective order," Marisol said. "Motion for you to conduct cross-examination on marital finances and dissipation. Subpoenas to the bank, the hotel, and rideshare." Florence wrote each item on her checklist and clipped the affidavits behind tab A. Marisol added a second list labeled "Do Not Touch" and drew a box around anything that mentioned Grant's employer systems. "If their HR calls again, you say one thing," Marisol said. "You have third-party records. And you want the process." Florence pulled up expense policy _update.pdf on the tablet and scrolled to the reporting section. She dialed the compliance hotline again and asked for an intake specialist. "Corporate compliance," the voice said. "My report is about misuse of travel reimbursements," Florence said. "I have bank-certified statements showing deposits and matching charges. I can provide dates, merchants, and categories." "Are you an employee?" the specialist asked. No, Florence said. I'm the spouse. I'm reporting through your published policy. The specialist asked for Grant's name, his department, and approximate dates. Florence read from her timeline, keeping it clinical. Hotel stays every 2 weeks, high-end dinners, rideshare trips after midnight. She did not say mistress. She did not say humiliation. Thank you, the specialist said. We will document this report. Someone may follow up. Florence ended the call and looked at Marisol. I'm reporting misconduct, she said, like an annoyed adult. Marisol's mouth twitched. Perfect, she said. Now we file. 2 days later, an email arrived from the company compliance address. Florence opened it at the co-working desk and read the single paragraph, then the line that mattered.
We have opened a review, it said. Please be prepared to provide information through proper channels. Florence reached the courthouse before the first docket call. She carried a binder with colored tabs, bank-certified statements, and subpoena returns from a hotel and a rideshare company. She checked the exhibits one more time at the hallway table, then clipped them to the front like a work packet. Grant arrived with his attorney, suit crisp, smile ready. He greeted a few people by name, then stopped when he saw Florence. His eyes went to the binder first, then back to her, as if the paper was a personal insult. Marisol waited near the vending machines, hands in her pockets. You're ready, Marisol said. I'm organized, Florence replied. That's the same thing today, Marisol said. The bailiff called their case. Florence took her place at the table and set out 3 exhibits. Grant's attorney opened a laptop and arranged her notes with practiced calm. The judge scanned the file. Miss Pugh, you requested to conduct cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand you must ask yes or no questions?
Yes.
Do you have legal training?
I have a law degree.
Grant's attorney stood. Your Honor, we object. She is not licensed counsel.
She is self-represented, the judge said. That is allowed.
Cross is technical, the attorney argued.
It is, the judge replied. So I'm limiting it. If she argues, I stop it. Florence nodded once. The judge looked at Grant. Answer what is asked, she said. Grant's smile flickered. Florence uncapped her pen, wrote exhibit numbers on tabs, and waited for the clerk to call the first witness. Grant was sworn in. He sat straight, hands folded, looking at Florence the way he looked at team leads during budget meetings. Florence rose and opened her binder. Mr. Holloway, you have a company-issued credit card, correct?
Yes. It is used for reimbursable business expenses? Yes. Your company has a travel and expense policy? Yes. You submit expenses and your company reimburses them? Yes. Florence lifted the stamped statement. Those reimbursements went into a joint account you shared with me, correct? Yes. Grant's attorney shifted in her chair. The judge didn't look up. Florence moved to the next tab. On May 20th, your card was charged at the Lakeshore Grand Hotel, correct? It was a work trip. Yes or no, was it charged? Yes. 2 days later, that same account shows rideshare charges after midnight, correct? I don't remember every ride. Yes or no? Yes. Florence slid a receipt copy forward. On that same cycle, there is a charge labeled Client Dinner at Montrose Table, correct? Yes. The merchant note on that charge reads Anniversary Set Menu, correct? Grant hesitated. I don't control what prints. Yes or no? Yes. Grant's attorney stood. Objection. Relevance. Overruled, the judge said. Marital spending and dissipation are relevant. Florence kept her voice flat. There is no client name on that receipt, correct? Not on the receipt. So you cannot identify a client who attended that dinner, correct? I meet people all the time. Yes or no? No. Florence flipped to a tab marked Off-Site. On June 3rd, you testified you were at a team off-site, correct? Yes. Your company calendar shows that offsite was June 10th, correct? I don't run the calendar. Yes or no? Yes. Florence pointed to the statement again. On June 3rd, the hotel charge posted again, correct? Yes. And the rideshare pickup address that night was not your office, correct? I don't track locations. Your rideshare record lists a pickup address, correct? Grant's throat worked. Yes. Grant's attorney tried to interrupt. Your Honor, these documents are subpoena returns and bank-certified statements, the judge said. Sit down. Florence closed the binder halfway, like she was finishing an audit section. You told this court these were business trips, correct? Yes. But you cannot name a client, you cannot match the dates to official travel, and the charges include anniversary set menus, correct? Grant's face reddened. I said they were work-related. Yes or no? Can you prove that? No. The judge asked a few follow-up questions, then ruled from the bench. Temporary orders were revised. The court found dissipation and financial control, and the asset split shifted hard toward Florence. She wrote the key terms on her legal pad because she would need them later, then gathered her papers without looking at Grant. In the hallway, a woman Florence didn't know clapped twice before stopping. Another person started to clap, then froze when the bailiff glanced over. No clapping, the bailiff said. Florence walked toward the exit with a stamped order in her folder. Her phone buzzed once. Not a call, but an email notification from the compliance address she'd been watching. Grant Holloway is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. She stared at the subject line as the courthouse doors swung shut behind her. Florence's appointment window was 40 minutes, written at the top of the court order in the same bland font as effective immediately. She arrived 10 minutes early, parked on the street, and checked her list before she stepped out. Kitchen items, personal files, winter coat. The small blue box marked tax. Nothing sentimental, nothing that could start a conversation. The doorman met her in the lobby with a clipboard and a neutral face. A building staffer stood beside him, and a security guard waited near the elevators, not looking at anyone for too long. You have until 2:15, the doorman said. Grant asked that you keep it to essentials. Florence nodded. I'm here for my property, she said. Nothing more. They rode up together. The condo door opened with a key the staffer carried, and Florence walked in behind him, keeping her tote on her shoulder and her list in her hand. The place looked staged, as if someone had removed anything that proved another person lived there. The living room shelves held Grant's framed awards perfectly centered. Her photos were gone. The kitchen counter was bare except for a bottle of hand soap and a paper towel roll. Florence moved through rooms like she was closing out a file. She checked the coat closet, pulled her parka free, and folded it into the tote. She opened the hall cabinet where she kept the household paperwork and found it empty, the folders replaced by a single envelope labeled copies. She didn't open it yet. She wrote paperwork missing on her list and kept moving. In the bedroom, drawers that used to hold her clothes were filled with neatly rolled ties and cologne samples. Her side of the closet had 2 hangers and a gap where her shoes used to line up. At the back of the closet, behind a stack of storage bins, she found a cardboard box shoved sideways. A strip of old packing tape still carried her handwriting. Law school. The lid was half crushed, like it had been sat on. Florence lifted it out, set it on the bed, and opened it with one finger. Her diploma sat under a layer of dust, the frame scuffed at one corner. She wiped the glass with the hem of her sleeve, not gently, just enough to make the name legible. She didn't hold it to her chest or stare at it for comfort. She slid it into a plain cardboard sleeve the staffer had brought, taped the edge, and wrote one word on the outside. Law. In the kitchen, she found her mixing bowls missing, the spice rack gone, the drawer of takeout menus replaced with nothing. She looked at the empty counter and said to nobody, "At least now I know what exclusive use means." The staffer checked his watch and cleared his throat. Florence nodded, went to the bathroom, gathered her toiletries from the travel bag she left there months ago, and dropped them into a small box. She added the blue tax box from under the sink and sealed it without checking the contents. Her phone rang as she carried the first box toward the door. The name on the screen was her mother-in-law. Florence answered because ignoring it would turn into another line in someone else's affidavit. "Florence," her mother-in-law said, already angry, "what are you doing to Grant?" "Future communication goes through counsel," Florence said. "If you need a document, it will be exchanged through the courthouse schedule." "That's not what I asked." "That's what I'm answering." She ended the call and didn't block the number. The staffer opened the door for her, and the security guard waited in the hall like a chaperone. Florence made 2 more trips, stacking boxes by the elevator, each one labeled with a marker: clothes, files, kitchen. Grant wasn't there. His absence felt like a decision, not a relief. When the elevator doors opened, Florence stepped in with her boxes, while the guard rode down with her and didn't speak. In the lobby, the doorman signed her exit sheet and handed her a copy. Florence folded it and put it behind the court order. Outside, she opened her trunk and loaded the boxes in the same order as her checklist, heavier items first so nothing shifted. She took a photo of each label for her records, then checked the street for Grant's car out of habit, and didn't see it anywhere. The last box was the cardboard sleeve with the diploma. She set it on top, pressed the trunk lid down until it latched, and wiped her hands on her jeans. Her phone lit up with an incoming call from an unfamiliar number with her company's area code, and Florence stared at it as her finger moved toward accept. Florence answered the unfamiliar number before it could roll to voicemail. "This is Dana from HR," the voice said. "Are you in a place where you can talk?" Florence leaned against her car, one hand on the trunk lid. "Yes," she said. "We concluded our review," Dana continued. "Your administrative leave is lifted, effective tomorrow. Your access will be restored overnight." Florence wrote the time on her checklist and asked, "Will my back pay process with payroll by Friday morning?" At 9 the next morning, she sat in a conference room at her company, laptop absent, badge working again. Dana slid a memo across the table. "Anonymous complaints happen," Dana said. "Your activity logs match your job scope. No policy violation." A second rep added, "We're releasing held wages today." Florence signed the acknowledgement and collected a reinstatement notice. When she walked back through the turnstiles, Ben from IT lifted a thumb drive and said, "Dashboards come back in 10. Before lunch, Marisol texted a screenshot from Grant's company. Grant Holloway placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Florence forwarded it to the folder labeled Romance, Corporate, and printed a copy for her binder. The compliance team replied with a request form and a secure address for submissions. Florence filled it out with dates, merchants, and bank stamp references, then mailed it certified from the post office on Clark. She kept the receipt with her court order and photographed it for backup. That afternoon, her phone pinged with a message from Diane. "I'm sorry for the weirdness," Diane wrote. "People thought you'd done something." Florence replied with a single line. "Thanks, I'm working through it." A mutual friend from Grant's circle sent, "I didn't know," then stopped responding when Florence asked, "Do you still have the party photos?" At the next grocery run, a neighbor who used to greet Grant avoided eye contact and hurried past. Florence paid, bagged, and left alone. 2 days later, she met Grant's attorney at a notary office, not across a dinner table. The notary checked IDs and watched signatures land on asset schedules, beneficiary changes, and transfer authorizations. Grant did not attend. His attorney slid documents forward like invoices. Florence signed where the tabs indicated and initialed every page corner. "I've never signed so much paper to become single," she said. The notary stamped, nodded once, and handed Florence a packet tied with a rubber band. At her bank branch, Kim walked her through separating the joint accounts under the new order. Florence opened a new checking account in her name and moved the court-awarded funds. Kim printed confirmation pages and stamped them without being asked. "You'll want beneficiaries updated too," Kim said. Florence updated the insurance contact and removed Grant from notifications. She signed a new card agreement, collected the debit card, and left with a folder of pages that no one could call unofficial. Back at her desk, the gray tiles on her dashboard turned green again. Ben leaned over the cubicle wall. "Sorry about last week," he said. "Management told us to lock it." Florence opened the access ticket and typed one sentence. "Restriction removed per HR." She didn't add commentary. Diane stopped by with a coffee she'd bought on her own. "Glad you're back," Diane said. Florence nodded, accepted it, and kept reviewing the same vendor file she'd left mid-page that morning. Marisol called that evening from her office. "They opened the internal fraud investigation," she said. "They'll want a statement through counsel." Florence met her at a copy shop and assembled a clean packet: certified statements, subpoena returns, and the compliance acknowledgement email. Marisol added a cover letter that listed only sources and dates. Florence sealed the envelope and paid for tracking. Outside, her phone buzzed with a group text from old friends suddenly active, asking if she was okay now. A week later, the first transfer posted, and Florence watched the balance change without refreshing twice. She took the court order to her insurer and updated the beneficiary forms, then scheduled the automatic payments for rent and utilities from her new account. At the kitchen table of her apartment, she placed the law box under a shelf and filed the rest by date. The only shared item left was the authorized user profile attached to Grant's card listed on her app. She opened the banking app and navigated to account settings, past the alerts and verification prompts. Under authorized users, Grant Holloway's name sat beside a toggle, as if he might borrow groceries later. Florence tapped the entry and selected Remove Authorized User. A confirmation screen appeared with a single sentence in bold. "This action is permanent." The button below read, Confirm Removal. Florence kept her thumb suspended above the screen until her breathing matched the steady hum of the fridge. Then she tapped Confirm Removal. The app asked for Face ID, accepted it, and replaced Grant Holloway's name with an empty line. She set the phone down and opened the court packet again, not to reread it, but to pull out the calendar sheet Marisol had circled. A volunteer clinic for self-represented people ran this week, the note said. Florence wrote the address on a sticky tab and stuck it to her keys. It felt like closing an account, not a marriage. 2 days later, her manager stopped by her desk with a lanyard pass. "They moved the Compliance Week mixer back to the Lakeshore Grand," he said. "You don't have to go, but you've been through enough audits to answer questions." Florence nodded, took the badge, and slid it into her tote. After work, she drove to the hotel, parked without valet, and walked through the lobby at the same hour Grant had once waved a microphone. Nobody blocked her route this time. The receptionist scanned her pass and handed her a room number for the clinic down the hall today. Marisol waited near the elevators, blazer thrown over one shoulder, phone in her hand. "Look at you, back on the scene," she said. Florence adjusted her name badge and glanced toward the ballroom doors, which were open for caterers and staff. "I'm not here to prove anything," she said. Marisol held out a small card with a stamped logo from a legal aid group. "Pro Se Clinic starts in 15 minutes, she said. "You won't be the lawyer. You'll be the person who knows where the forms are." Florence took the card and tucked it behind her badge, for now. A man from Florence's department recognized Marisol and tried to place her. "Are you the attorney friend?" he asked. Marisol nodded. The man looked at Florence's badge. "So you really do have that law degree," he said, half joking, half curious. Florence didn't smile for permission. "Yes," she said. "What time does the clinic start, and which room?" Marisol pointed with her chin. Florence tightened the badge clip and spoke as if she were confirming a meeting invite. "I'll try not to turn it into a joke," she said, then walked with Marisol toward the conference corridor without looking back. On the way to the clinic room, Florence passed the ballroom entrance. A lead rolled carts through the doors, and a technician adjusted a speaker stand. Florence saw the corner where the drink table had been and the spot where Grant had lifted his glass. She didn't stop to replay it. She checked her watch, then checked the clinic card again, making sure she was walking toward the room number, not away from it. A guard nodded at her as if she belonged there, which was new. Florence nodded back and kept moving, the binder pressed to her ribs today. The clinic room had folding tables, stacks of packets, and a sign-in sheet that asked for case numbers. A coordinator handed Florence a badge that read Volunteer Support and offered a quick briefing. "We can't give legal advice," the coordinator said. "We can explain procedures." Florence nodded and set her binder on a side table. She pulled extra pens from her tote and lined them up beside the forms. When someone asked where to find financial disclosure instructions, Florence slid the printed packet across without commentary. Marisol watched from the doorway, letting Florence work without stepping in front of her. A woman about Florence's age hovered near the sign-in sheet, clutching a court envelope so hard the paper creased. Her hands shook every time she tried to unzip her bag. Florence set down the pen she was sorting and moved a chair closer. "Do you have your case number?" she asked. The woman shook her head. Florence pointed to the top right corner of the envelope. "It's usually printed there," she said. The woman looked, blinked fast, and nodded. Florence slid a blank intake form forward and held the clipboard steady while the woman wrote as the line inched ahead. People shuffled in 2 loose lines, one for paperwork, one for short consultations. Florence watched the woman's knuckles whiten, then reached into her tote and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. She placed it on the table like an offering that didn't require a speech. Marisol walked past and tapped Florence's shoulder once, approving, then moved to help someone else. The coordinator raised a voice over the room. "Next," she called. Florence pulled her chair closer to the woman, set the blank paper between them, and pointed to the first box on the form without saying anything else today.